Hello, everyone. Nice to see everybody joining. Yeah, we'll just give it a couple of minutes to wait for everybody to arrive. If in the meantime you would like to put where you're joining from in the chat box, that would be really great to see. And Poland, Bosnia, Manila, all over. Portugal, welcome. So yeah, we'll just give it another few seconds for everybody to get here. And yeah, maybe we should start now. So hello to everybody who's joined, and welcome to today's session, Assessment Summer Camp for Teachers. Today's session is called Real Empowerment in the Real World, Certifying English Skills in a Changing Digital Landscape. And today we will be hearing from Jane Bledsoe. Jane is the Senior Product Manager for Pearson English International Certificate, which was formerly known as PTE General, and International Certificate Young Learners, formerly known as PTE Young Learners. She's responsible for innovations related to the current paper-based product and for launching the new computer-based test, which is coming out in September. Jane's worked in product management roles for Pearson for 8 years. So we're really looking forward to her talk. Just a little bit of quick housekeeping before we get started. We'll be having a short Q&A session towards the end of the webinar. So if you have questions, anything comes to you during Jane's talk, please feel free to submit your questions into the Q&A box at any time, and we'll gather those up and ask Jane at the end and try to get through as many as possible. Certificates of attendance will be sent out in the days following this session by the end of this week. And finally, the webinar will be recorded and available shortly after the session in case you'd like to share it with colleagues or watch it again. So now I'm very happy to pass over to Jane.
Thanks so much, Sophia, and hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our session today on Real Empowerment in the Real World, Certifying English Skills in a Changing Digital Landscape. So it's a big title, and I wanted to just say I love the theme of the assessment camp, because I know that over this next couple of weeks, several weeks of assessment camp, you're going to get all the enrichment, but none of the bugs, which is the thing about camping and things that always gets to me in the end. I love camping, I love being outdoors, but I don't like the insects. So at least you don't have that to worry about today. So let's go ahead and get started. And what we're going to be focusing on today is English language proficiency assessment. So yes, this is certifying English skills with assessment. And we're going to start with the big picture, kind of what's happening globally. And then we're going to move to some important learner research that we've been doing this year. I think that when we think about the real world, we certainly can't talk about that without knowing exactly what learners in the real world are saying right now about testing, about where they want to take tests, about digital exams and AI scoring. So we have perspectives from around the world that I want to share with you today. So we're going to spend the bulk of our time talking about that research. But I also want to get some insights from you. So please, everyone, make sure that you have your digital phone, your mobile phones handy. We're going to do some polls, just 2 polls today. But it will be important that you have your phone handy to do that. And we'll be going to something called slido.com, SLIDO.com. So if you want to start looking for that now, great. Otherwise, when I get to that point in the presentation, there will be a QR code. You can simply use your camera on your phone to take a picture of the QR code, and it'll take you right to that poll. So whichever way you want to do it is fine. Just have those phones handy. After we get your insights and feedback, I'm going to go into a little more detail about what is Pearson English International Certificate and how does it address the real world needs that you express, that your students express. And then what does a test design look like? How do you have a paper and a computer-based form of a test that are live and in play at the same time? How do they both address real-world needs? And we'll talk about that. Finally, as Sophia mentioned, there will be time for questions at the end. So I'm going to plow through a lot of this very quickly, but there will be time for questions. So please use the Q&A box and type them in, and Sophia and I will read them out at the end, and we'll cover just as many as we can. Let's go ahead and get started. The big picture. You all may be aware of this, but there are 1.5 billion English language learners around the world right now. And according to British Council, it's just growing. There are so many more people wanting to certify their English language skills, to get on with their lives, to go to the universities they want, to get the kinds of jobs that they need. And so we know that this is a growth market, and almost every one of you have been affected by COVID in one way, shape, or form. That has slowed down learners in some cases. In some cases, they haven't had access to the testing that they've wanted to do. And so COVID's had a huge impact, and perhaps it has also accelerated what candidates are looking for in assessments of the future. And so that was one of our reasons for doing the research that we're going to be sharing with you today. We wanted to understand, is COVID just a short-term issue, or is it a long-term change in attitude toward digital testing and toward testing from home? So I have some good data to share with you on that today. But the other things we know is because you have all been affected by COVID, it has perhaps slowed down your capacity to get in the classroom and to teach them everything they need to know. And we know that English language teachers are in great demand. You've got job security for a long, long while, and we need more of you. We know accessibility is increasingly important. That accessibility definition really is twofold. One, meaning we know we have to get to those learners who can't get to a test center. That's accessibility. We need to get to them with the testing that they need to do to get on with their lives. But we also know that there's a growing need for people with learning disabilities, dyslexia, and things like that. And traditional testing hasn't had good answers for that. Digital testing has more answers for accessibility needs, and so that's an exciting component. The last item I have here is I went to Wikipedia this week to try to find out how many English language assessments are there really. Well, there are quite a lot, folks, and I'm sure you know this, but about 60 English language assessments are listed right now on Wikipedia. So that's a lot for people to choose from, a lot for you as teachers to choose from. But what is true is that there are only a few of them that issue a certificate, a valued certificate that allow your students to get on with their lives and to present that to the university of their choice, to give that to an employer to be part of that employment piece. So we know that there are a lot of options out there, but we know certificates are quite important. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. So what do learners need? Learners who are taking English language proficiency tests, there's a certain profile of these kinds of learners, and particularly those who are compelled to take digital tests and take tests from home. We're going to talk about that profile, what their needs and expectations are, what the core value proposition is of taking a test from home, and is this a short-term or long-term solution according to our learners. So let's start with some profiles. Who takes the test and what do they need? Well, we've done quite a lot of research over the past several years. So this first slide really introduces you to the profiles of the learners and what they are telling us they use in selecting a test. We know you as their teachers are a big influencer in what tests they take. But beyond that, what else makes a difference to them in terms of taking this test? So let's start with that motivation piece first. And the first thing that these learners tell us is that the type of certificate they get is a really big part of how they choose the test. So these are all candidates who have either taken tests in the past or intend to in the future. This is the primary thing they're looking for, is what kind of certificate they're going to get. And then following that, they're interested in the flexibility that the test offers. What date, what time, what location, how much can they influence and have empowerment to take on the date, time, and place that they wish. The speed at which they receive their results actually comes last in this list, which is interesting, right? We've often heard, they need those test results just as soon as they can get them, and they do, but these other things are more important to them: flexibility and the certificate. Now, along the left-hand side of this slide, you'll see the profiles of the kinds of learners we have heard from that have answered our surveys, that we have found in our research to be having a real compelling need for digital testing and for at-home testing. The first one is a person like Carmen, who is a university student, and she's going to complete her study and then start applying for jobs that require her to have a certificate proving her English language proficiency. So she's our first type of learner that we have talked to. Second type of learner is the high school student, the one who is completing a secondary education and then going on to his university of choice. And many universities, even within one's own country, are requiring an English language certificate for entrance. So it is an entrance certificate of sorts for them. The third type of profile of candidates we've spoken to are those who are young professionals already. They're already in the workplace, sometimes working for global companies, and they want to improve their chances at promotion. And so that certificate will help them prove that they have the English language skills they need and be in the right place at the right time for that promotion when it comes along. So these are the kinds of learners that we're engaging with and who have also helped us with some research we've just done this year. Now in 2021, we knew we had these types of candidates out there. We knew their compelling need for testing was for a certificate and that they wanted more flexibility. But what we didn't know is how important is at-home testing for them? How important is digital testing for them? And so we went to another 800 people in 5 markets. These participants, like the profiles I just shared with you, have either taken an English language proficiency test or intend to take one in the next year. And we wanted to ask them questions about digital testing and where they prefer to do it. So what you'll see in this next slide here is responses from Poland, Argentina, Mexico, Italy, and Spain, and hundreds of candidates in each of these markets. They weren't necessarily Pearson customers. These could have been English language testers taking any of our competitive products. We didn't specify that here. So what we wanted to know was, are you very or somewhat interested in taking a proficiency test from home? Now, the way that is phrased is remote proctored, because a test of this kind, where you're certifying your English language skills, cannot be taken without some security involved. Whether that's at a test center or you're doing it from home, we're going to observe that candidate the entire time. So remote proctored means if you're taking it from home, you're going to be watched with an online proctor solution. The green bars in this particular chart show you the percentage of candidates who are interested in taking a digital test from home. And you can see that that's pretty high, 80% or better for the most part in every country. Candidates are interested in taking a digital test from home. The dark gray bar right next to it indicates these candidates are very or somewhat interested in taking a digital test, yes, but in a test center. So there's still, a lot of interest in testing from test centers. They're not going away, but the remote proctoring simply gives us that flexibility that they're looking for. Finally, the light gray bar in this chart shows us how many people are interested in taking a paper test from a test center. And that, of course, has the least amount of interest right now. Again, could be due to COVID, or just could be that this market is starting to shift and change. So again, we're seeing a preferred option of digital, taking the test from home. And that paper-based testing seems to be the least popular, but still 60% or better of candidates willing to do that. You might be saying, yeah, there's some interest in taking a test from home, but how interested are they really? So we wanted to show you the proportion of respondents who are very interested in taking a proficiency test from home. And this percentage is quite high for a very interested pool, right? So all pretty much over 50%, except perhaps in Italy, which is close to 50%. So there is strong interest in taking a test from home, not just mild interest. And so that's a really important takeaway here, that we have more than 50% in nearly every market strongly interested in testing from home. The next question we wanted to find out about was, why are they interested in testing from home? What are their assumptions about testing from home? Do they think it's going to be cheaper? Do they think it's going to address their accessibility needs? Is that a big percentage of the population? So we wanted to ask the question about, what's the motivation here? Why are you really interested in this? And I think it came across loud and clear that candidates want to be, yes, more flexible, certainly, but they also want to be with familiar equipment in their own surroundings, and that's a really important part of this test delivery experience. They don't want to have to drive to an unfamiliar test center. They don't want to have to use someone else's equipment. They're taking a digital test. They want to do it on their computer, and they want to do it in their own time and in their own surroundings. Now, I did want to point to the accessibility needs. Again, I think this is an important takeaway. While it's only 9% of candidates who said they think it will be easier for their accessibility needs, traditionally, in our testing experiences, there's only about 1% of the population that has had an accessibility requirement where they needed something like more time or a handicapped accessible location. So the fact that this is 9% of the respondents, that's a pretty high number, and surprised us a little bit. But the great thing is, with a digital exam, you can actually address more learning disabilities, perhaps, than you can with a paper-based test. Things like dyslexia are well addressed with colors, fonts, background, that kind of thing. So we think that a digital solution perhaps meets more of the need on the accessibility side. One of the things that would concern us about delivering a test from home would be the internet connection, the equipment, and having a private space so that test-like assessment conditions can be established within someone's home. So we asked the question, do you think you have stable internet? Do you think you have the right equipment, a computer and headphones? And do you think that you have the privacy you need to take a test? And I think it's really interesting. Again, I think COVID may have accelerated people's access to internet speeds that they need, because over 94% report they have stable internet. That's pretty remarkable. And candidates came from all over the geographies, both urban and rural candidates answered this question. 94%, more than 94% report stable internet. That's really great. In addition, more than 87% report they have computers and headphones. And again, really important to the delivery of this digital test that they have those things. So we're seeing really positive response there too. The thing that surprised us in this slide is having enough privacy seems to be the biggest challenge. And while 80% or better in every market report that they can find privacy, there's still, a good 20% out there that may have a hard time closing a door, keeping the family out while they take a test. So that will be the thing that they struggle with, perhaps more than equipment and more than internet speed. It's the privacy that they will have to ensure that they have. Ultimately, we wanted to know, with at-home testing, is this a short-term solution or is this a long-term need? So we asked two questions of the candidates in this research. Before COVID-19, would you have chosen to take this test from home? wanted to just see how people's perceptions may have shifted. And then after COVID, let's say 2022, 70% of all of our countries are immunized, and this isn't an issue anymore. Are you still likely to want to take the test from home? So you can see a rather large shift, right? Before COVID, people are saying about 37% would have wanted to take a test from home. After COVID, we're looking at 80% here of candidates quite likely or very likely to take that test from home. And we did see some geographical differences. Argentina and Spain, for instance, showing a higher percentage than 80% wanting to take the test remotely in the future, and about 75% from the other geographies. But we're seeing a huge shift in perception about taking tests from home and feeling like that's a good way to do this. So we think that this could be a long-term solution and not just a short-term fix for a challenging situation. So what I'm going to move on to next is digital testing and what learners think about artificial intelligence, what they think about scoring, and what they think about certification, digital certification. These are all important things as we consider our roadmap for the future and what candidates are going to like, and perhaps what are they going to be cautious about. So with digital testing comes artificial intelligence scoring with a digital exam that includes reading, writing, speaking, and listening. They're actually speaking into a computer. And we wanted to know how candidates felt about that. What are they going to think about having speaking to a computer, but then also being scored by a computer in artificial intelligence? Really surprising, but 95% of candidates are positive about artificial intelligence, or they don't have an opinion. So I think the takeaway here is they're not afraid of this artificial intelligence component of testing. So that's exciting because we do think this is the wave of the future. And they feel, for the most part, that this is going to be a good solution, and they're not afraid of it. Most candidates expect that AI scoring is going to be faster, and the primary, that's their primary answer why they're not afraid of artificial intelligence. They're going to get a quicker score. That's the outcome that they're in the real world they need, right? But in addition to that, they feel like there could be less bias involved in artificial intelligence scoring. It's not dependent on the examiner. It's dependent on the machine having scored their answers in a fast and fair way. In addition to the digital delivery of a test, we were interested in how certification might change. We know this pool of learners is really keen to take a digital test. We know that they are very keen to get a certificate, but is that certificate going to be digital, or is it going to be in paper? And how do they feel about score reporting? So in this slide, we have mixed up both that digital score report as well as the certificate. I want to focus your attention on the green boxes first. You can see on the far left green box that's highlighted, a printed certificate is still the way most candidates prefer to receive their certificate, as a printed copy. And while we might want to move to digital certification because there's some conveniences with that, there's still a little bit of a lag in that in terms of how many candidates feel that's going to be suitable for the jobs they're applying for or the universities that they wish to go to. So in the second green box and kind of the middle of the graphic there, you'll see that about 50%, just over 50% of candidates are interested in a PDF, a digital certificate. So what we might see here is that these coexist for a while. We have printed certificates going out to candidates, but digital certificates as backup. This is the way that we might see our roadmap for the future. But the other thing I wanted to point your attention to here had to do with score reports. So a certificate is that thing that says, yes, this candidate is at the level that they say they're at, right? It's physical evidence of where they stand in the CEFR range. But the score report actually gives the candidate more information about how they scored on reading, writing, listening, and speaking. So that's the distinguishing characteristic between certificate and scores. And so if you'll focus now on the yellow boxes, you can see that a printed report of scores is less popular than a digital report of scores. So with our launch of our digital test, candidates will get a digital score report and a printed paper certificate. But I just wanted you to see this matches up well in the real world with what candidates are asking for. Finally, there's a little star over the 32% at the end of this graphic. And I just wanted to point to this because it is something that we are watching and looking at. Digital badging is becoming really popular. And again, this is for candidates primarily who are employment oriented. They are looking for that next job and they need a digital badge on their LinkedIn profile. And in Argentina, that's come across loud and clear as a really important thing to deliver. So we will be looking at this too. But important to know that digital badging is really moving up also in terms of importance for reporting on outcomes. We did ask the question about why digital certificate is important to candidates. And primarily the reason was some candidates believe it's more official if they can show a digital form of their certificate. So interesting, convenience came up, certainly. Easier to share, yes. Easier to access in the long term because paper certificates get lost, right? Digital certificates are there for a long time, and so those are benefits. But primarily the reason why candidates answered, those who said they were interested in digital certificate, is they felt it was more official. All right, now it's your turn. We want to get some of your insights, and so we have a couple of poll questions. This is not a quiz, it's a poll. So these are your opinions. If you'll please go to slido.com on your mobile phones, so you can pick this up right now. Go to slido.com. The code is 4924. But on the next slide here, if you prefer, you can just use your phone and take a picture of that QR code, and it will go straight to Slido for you, and you don't have to really type anything in. This is our first poll question for you. So thinking about your students and thinking about your population and where you are in the world, do you think English proficiency testing from home is going to be an appropriate solution for your learners? We want to hear what teachers believe. So the first option, and you can answer more than one thing in this poll, because I think it's true that many of us would say, yeah, it's a great solution, but not sure if it's secure, not sure if it's going to work in my community. So you can answer there's more than one right answer here. So let's just see how this stacks up with those of you on the call with us today. And we'll give you about 10 seconds or so. It's kind of fun to watch the percentages shifting, changing. We've got about 60% saying, yep, great solution. About 33, 34% saying, not sure if it's going to work technologically in my community. Security concern, 20% or so. And there are many people who still want to take this test at a test center. So test centers are not going away, folks. I'm sure that we will continue to see them for quite some time. So I think that's a pretty good number of you. 50% great solution, 41% not sure about the technology, 20% not sure about security, and about 11% preferring test center. Great. Thank you so much for participating in that. I have one more question for you. And this one is, do you look forward to the day when certificates and score reports are digital and not hard copy? It's a good question, right? Don't know how often teachers have to be involved in handing out those certificates, but I think that we have certainly seen that in our experience, that certificates get lost in the mail, or they may be printed without the right name and have to be redone. Digital certificates give you flexibility to do everything more quickly. So we can see about 56% or so saying no more lost certificates. Great. Maybe, but it really depends on what the university employers need. And that is absolutely true. We know that there is some catching up to do among employers, among the universities. They want paper certificates in many cases. And so we do need them to catch up with the digital future. And so we will provide a paper certificate for quite some time into the future. 6% saying paper certificates, score reports are here to stay. Great, I'm going to give you about 10 more seconds there. All right, looks like we've kind of stabilized. Yep. All right, so preferred option, yes, is digital score reports and certificates, and 40% saying, really depends on what they need ultimately from the university and the employer's sake. And about 5%, 6% saying paper certificates are here to stay. Thanks again for participating in the polls. That's all the polls I have for you today, but we're going to talk now about International Certificate, our new online test, which we just launched in beta last week. We're really excited to tell you a little bit more about it, what it includes, what our vision is for this test going forward. So we'll spend a little bit of time on this. And I think what is an important takeaway from this slide, because there's a lot going on here, is that this is not just about the test. An assessment is just one part of the picture. What we want to be sure of with the assessments that we deliver from Pearson is that they are completely supported. And with this particular digital type of a test, we know that we need a variety of free and paid practice tools for teachers and for learners. And so with this new test, we are launching lots of support for you, lots of support for learners. And when you receive this recording of this presentation, along with it, Sophia will be sending out, or someone from our marketing department will be sending out a digital rucksack. And in that rucksack, you will have access to teacher tools and learner tools that you can leverage to learn more about the digital test. Accessibility, I mentioned accessibility before. Accessibility, again, really has two definitions here. We want students who need to take a test to have access to this one. And so that means having it available on demand, place and time the student needs. But it also means addressing the needs for those people who have accessibility concerns, like a learning disability and other things that make it difficult for them to take a paper-based test. We know that the certificate is the most important thing to the learners. And so along with that certificate comes the recognition that it gets them entrance to universities and to the jobs that they want. So that recognition is really an important piece of what you get with a preferred test. The learner focus, we want to make sure that we're helping test takers no matter what their proficiency goals are, whether it's to get into a university, whether it's to get a new job, or perhaps just to be able to socialize on the internet with others in English. That learner focus is really an important part of what we're delivering with this exam. And finally, future growth. We know our candidates are not one and done candidates. These are people who have taken tests their whole lives, and they're going to continue to take tests. And we know that they might take a B2 this year, they might be taking the C1 next year. They might be taking a C2 a couple of years from now. And we want to be sure that we can have enough content and enough value for them in the certificates to continue to take them. So that future growth is really important for those lifelong learners in the real world. How is International Certificate different from other tests? Well, as I said earlier on in this presentation, there are 60 tests out there. There's a lot of tests to choose from. And a few of them, including Pearson English International Certificate, that offer a certificate to the candidate. But the other thing that we offer, in addition, that perhaps some of our competitors don't, is real world English. The exam is not based on grammar and your knowledge of grammar. The exam is based on being able to read, write, speak, listen to real English, real events that are going on today, real current activities underway. That's what the test is made up of. So the content comes from newspaper articles and comes from radio programs and podcasts. It is integrated tasks, and this is another important part of the digital test, is that we're not really measuring in isolation any one of those skills, reading, writing, listening, and speaking, because in the real world, we don't just read or just listen. We're expected to respond when we read something, when we listen to something. We're expected to be able to speak and listen, read and write. And the integrated tasks in the test really are a great assessment of that capability. So the integrated tasks are really important here. We also use international English throughout the test. So various accents from different parts of the English-speaking world are included in the listening part of the test. We think our test is going to be more convenient. Simple online booking. You can do it up to 24 hours in advance. So, you need a test because there's a job that you want to apply for this week. You can take a test this week, beginning with our digital solutions in September. Testing on demand any day, anytime, and it's a single test under 2 hours. We know candidates are going to love that. That means that they don't have to schedule 2 different times to come in and take a test. They can sit down once, less than 2 hours, complete speaking, reading, writing, listening at one shot. Enhanced security. We know that this test has high stakes for many of these candidates. And so therefore, security is quite important. We are delivering it at Pearson VUE test centers, as well as we will be delivering it from home, but with a proctor where the candidate is observed the entire time. Finally, the other thing that distinguishes this test from some of our competition is it's the only test that has a predictor of your outcome in something we call the readiness test. The readiness test has the equivalent computer-based items to the digital exam. Candidates take it in about 45 minutes and can tell if they are ready, potentially ready, or not ready to sit for that level of the exam. So that gives them the confidence walking into that test that they know what they're doing. And if they don't, they have time to remediate. Fast results. By 2022, the results turnaround time on the exams will be 2 weeks or less. Might be a little longer this year as we're standardizing outcomes between paper and computer-based tests. But this will be much quicker, weeks shorter than paper-based test results. A couple other distinguishing characteristics between our paper-based and computer-based tests. They will, by the way, coexist. We will have a paper variant and a computer variant in the market. And they address many of the same kinds of learners, and they all get a certificate at the end. But what's different about the computer-based test, the digital test, is this ability to do it on demand when they need it. Testing from home with online proctoring, also available only for the digital test, and the quick score turnaround time, 2 weeks or less, that's the digital test. So there are a couple of advantages to the digital computer-based testing. How it works, I'm going to go through this fairly quickly, but we will have a one-stop shop for the learners and teachers to register, to find appointments, to book tests, to check results, to buy exams and practice. And it's all in this new website called the Test Hub. Pearson English Test Hub is a resource for teachers, for institutions, and for learners themselves to be able to go in here and easily access the information they need to book that test and to find their results later. So I know they're going to love this because we heard in our research over the past couple of years, one of their biggest frustrations is having too many places to go to book that test, to find the test, to take the test, to get their results. So we think this is going to be quite popular with learners in particular. Now, as part of Test Hub, The learners can choose a preferred date and time for their test. Again, this is an on-demand test, whether they take it at a test center or they take it at home. It's on demand, so they can choose their date and time. But the great thing about the digital test is they can also choose to take it from home. Now, I mentioned before, and some of you, are worried about that security aspect of taking a test from home. This is just a little picture of what a candidate has to do in order to take a test from home. They will be fully observed the entire time. So with that comes a system check to be sure that there's nothing else running on the computer at the time of the test and just before the test where the system test is done. They also have to install the on-view interaction with the proctor. So they'll do a quick download and test it to make sure it's working right. And then they will have to have a picture of their ID, picture of themselves, and a picture of their environment so that there's no compromise on security here. Candidates, again, have to have a good internet connection. They have to have a computer. They have to have a headphone with a microphone. They have to have a private, quiet space, and they have to complete all of that system check before the test can begin. So we're going to lock this down pretty, very securely for candidates so that we don't have any issues with the connection or issues with anything that could be deemed inappropriate in that testing experience. Learners might also choose a date and time where they want to take it at a test center. And we know, again, that there was about 11% of you on the call today who said, yep, you still want your candidates to take it at a test center. We are working with about 50 test centers right now in various locations around the world to get them set up to deliver this test this fall. But again, in the test center, the picture you see here, they will be observed the entire time they're in that test center taking the digital test. They will have their own location, their own computer, their own headset. They'll be working right within a study carrel as they are in this picture. But you can see the person at the desk is watching, and if anything seems insecure in any way, the proctor would then stop the test. We are hearing from some places around the world where there might be a hybrid model where a learner may be able to choose an online proctoring, but then go to a test center. You'll remember that data from the research with the learners that said privacy might be a problem at home. And in that case, there could be test centers willing to do the online proctoring. What that means is that the candidate would sit in a room by themselves in that location at that test center. There would be a greeter that would help the candidate get to that space and do the system check and whatnot. But other than that, the candidate's alone in a room in a test center. And this is a model that some people are putting in place now. Now, the thing to be cautious about with this kind of a solution is that firewalls can be an issue in delivering a remote proctored solution. So that's something that if you're interested in this kind of a model, please check in with your Pearson representative in your market and see if this is possible and ensure that all the system checks are done well in advance. I wanted to run through just a couple quick things about test design before we move on and get to our Q&A time. How are we doing? Yeah, just have a few more slides here. I think it's important, I mentioned those integrated skills in the computer-based test. Again, this is real-world content. And what the computer-based test allows us to do is to measure candidates' ability to listen and read, listen and speak, read and speak, read and write. And so those yellow highlighted portions are the new item types that a candidate will see in the computer-based test. So that's an important part of addressing the real world need for English language skills. The computer-based test tends to be shorter, especially at the higher levels, B2, C1, C2. You can see the test is under 2 hours, where in a paper-based test, it's going on 3 hours, closer to 3 hours. So yeah, it's quicker. The computer-based test is definitely quicker, but that doesn't mean that that works for everyone, right? So there, again, back to some accessibility needs. If a candidate has medical evidence of ADHD, a speech impairment, a sight impairment, a diagnosed learning difficulty of some kind, they could choose a test that is a bit longer to allow them enough time to adequately complete it. And of course, comfort aids would be available for any candidates that needed them too. New digital score reports, we're excited about this. I think the digital score report gives the candidate a lot more information than the paper-based test was able to deliver. So the candidate will find out just how they did in each component part of the test. So this B1 test taker, Jane Doe, she got a B1, she scored at the merit level, but you can see that her skills were really best in listening. And then the score report in the back here would show you that her skills at the speaking side were only at A2. So on page 2 of her score report, she'll find out what book she could use to learn more, to get better, and then where to focus that energy, particularly when it would come to speaking, to get her up to, you know, the next level. If she's preparing for B2, what can we do to help her get there? And the example you'll see for page 2 here on the course mapping and the listening skills, if she wants to get to SEFR B2, here's the thing she needs to do in the pages she can visit in the book. There are group score reports as well that are digital that will be available to teachers, so you can track your class's performance and what they need to do from a remedial standpoint. This is a picture of what the score report looks, or sorry, what the certificate looks like. So I just showed you digital score reports. That's going to launch with our test in September. The printed certificate will also be part of the picture. They will get a printed hard copy certificate mailed to them. And that is not going away. The printed certificate will remain. And we will look at digital solutions for that in the future. Where is it being delivered? Well, the great news about our digital exam is that frankly, we could deliver it anywhere in the world. There are a few countries where you can't deliver it, but for the most part, can be delivered anywhere in the world because of using OnView as our remote proctor solution that has opened up the digital testing landscape for us quite a lot. But what is true is people around the world have similar needs. And so I wanted to give you a few final takeaways before we end today and get to your questions. What did we learn in our research? Well, these are the things I wanted you to remember. Learners prefer digital tests and digital score reports. And the online test meets test takers and teachers' needs for that real world flexibility. Testing from home is not a short-term fix, but a long-term solution. We can see that 50% or more of learners are strongly interested in taking a test from home, even post-COVID. Learners need a test that delivers an official certificate. Certificates are not going away for this test. And the great thing about the international certificate is that our certificates don't have an expiration date on them. You can use that for quite some time. Learners are not afraid of speaking to a computer or artificial intelligence scoring. This is an important takeaway. We have heard from teachers when I've been out visiting with some of you that there's been a fear that talking to a computer is just going to be just off-putting to learners, or that artificial intelligence is going to be, not the way to go for measuring speaking skills. Well, learners aren't afraid of it, and that's really a good thing to know. Learners want to be empowered to choose the date, the time, the location of their tests. And the really great news and takeaway here is Pearson English International Certificate. Learners will be able to do it in just a couple of months. By September, they will be able to buy this test themselves, take it anywhere, anytime, with the appropriate security. There's a variety of resources in this final slide here, but I know that Sophia's got plans to send you many of these things as well. So when you get the recording, this will be available for you. You'll have all these URLs. Otherwise, watch for that goodie bag, that rucksack of goodies, and you'll have a lot more detail in there about things you can use. All right, so here is my email address. If by chance we don't get to your question today, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to answer your question, any questions about our research that we've done or the digital test that's going to be launching soon. And we'll be happy to answer any of your questions. So at this point, I'm going to ask Sophia if we can have a look at some of the Q&A that's come in.
Yes, hello. Thank you very much, Jane. That was brilliant. We've got loads of questions. Yeah, loads of questions come in. So where shall I start? Somebody has just asked us now, can a learner take the international international certificate test more than once to improve their scores?
Yes, they can. You know, what's interesting is with international certificate, we have a pretty high pass rate as it stands. On the paper-based test, I think it's an 85+ % of people pass the test first time. So we haven't seen a lot of retakes. Now, with the digital test, we're working on a lot of research to ensure that these tests are equated such that you get the same outcome, whether you take a paper-based or computer-based test. We would expect that the pass rate will be 85% on the computer-based test. But that's not to say you can't retake it. You could retake it. Now, you can retake the next one as soon as you get your scores from the first one. But a third test attempt, we're going to ask you to wait and do a little more prep work. So there's a waiting of about 3 months, I think, between the second instance and the third instance. But yeah, you can absolutely retake this for a better score.
Question about your research at the beginning. You presented findings from your research where you're looking at 5 countries in particular, Poland, Argentina, Mexico, Italy, and Spain. Somebody has asked, are there reasons that you chose these 5 countries? And if so, what are they?
Yeah, good question. Yes, we chose those countries because that's where we're going. We imagine we'll have the greatest growth. We have a lot of paper-based test takers there in those markets today, and we expect that we're going to have digital testing growth in those markets in the future. So they've been working with us, our Pearson colleagues and teachers and learners in those markets have been working with us for the past 3 years to come up with a digital solution that meets their needs. And so we've really focused in on them because we think that's where the greatest growth potential is right now.
That's great, thank you. A question about accents. So obviously we're looking at test takers coming in from all over the world who will have different accents when they're speaking English. How will the test deal with that?
Great question. You know, what we are doing in this next, I'd say 6 months or so, is with the speaking test in particular, we are using human scorers to listen to the audio recordings that come through. And the human scorers then, all of their scoring will feed the artificial intelligence engine of the future. So in 2022, we'll move to machine scoring of those speaking skills. But we expect candidates from all over the world will be human scored initially and then feed the artificial intelligence engine for the future. So I would imagine that they, you know, if we get lots of volume from a variety of countries, which we expect, particularly with online proctoring as a solution, we're going to have a vast amount of data and a vast amount of accents that train the engine. So an engine doesn't just come up with an answer and score things without humans doing the initial work. So I think this is going to be really valuable to have as many candidates from around the world this next 6 months as we can get, so we can train the engine appropriately.
Fantastic. And there's a great question here. If the paper and computer-based tests have different item types, different questions, how do we know they'll have the equivalent outcomes?
Yeah, great question. So we're in research right now. So we're in our beta phase just now. And what we're doing is we are working with candidates who have taken the paper-based test in the past 6 months and are taking the computer-based equivalent. And we're ensuring that their results are equivalent. So there's a lot of research underway just now to do that equivalence exercise. Then there's also a standardization exercise where we're looking for all levels of capability on the computer-based test to be taking the test from September through October this year, and doing a standardization exercise to ensure that outcomes are going to be equivalent on whatever form of test the candidate takes. So we don't do this lightly. We want candidates to have an equivalent experience, an equivalent outcome, no matter what test they choose. And so our research teams are heavily engaged in ensuring that right now.
That's great, thank you. Another one about the research that you presented at the beginning, and particularly regarding the format of the certificate. What was the age group of these test takers that we were speaking to? And did that give any insight into? Did you notice any trends among maybe younger or older learners as to what sort of format they preferred?
Yeah, so the age group that we spoke to or had the survey answered by was 18 to 35. So high end of the secondary school students, you know, the oldest secondary students all the way up to young professionals. And in terms of the certificate, it wasn't broken out by age and a preference between 18 and 35. But what we do know is that the certificate and the digital certificate just is easier for professionals, young professionals, to be able to move along in their employment pursuits. Whereas the paper certificate we have used with our secondary schools for many, many years. And so if I was going to draw any conclusions from what I've seen in the research and what I've seen from our learners over the past 3 years, the younger aged candidates would be seeking that paper-based. The older aged candidates in the workplace are seeking the digital. The score report, was pretty loud and clear. The score report was a digital preference no matter the age.
On the digital certificates again, how will we ensure that these can't be forged? I mean, what are we doing around the fact that people, this is a certificate that can carry a lot of weight when it comes to employment and university applications. So how can we ensure that people won't fake their certificates?
Yeah, great question. So there are security features on the certificate itself today. So on the paper-based side anyway, there's a watermark and there's a hologram, and there are things like that on the paper-based side. But on the digital certificate, what we expect to do is to launch a version of the score report website where employers and schools would log in with a code to see if their candidate has the required skills. So it will be a password protected score report website where they can pick up a digital certificate as well.
That's great. And how can we prepare students for the test? How can we get them familiar with the sorts of items that they'll see, and so they're comfortable and ready on test day to do their best with their, their real English skills, rather than, how can they overcome their nerves, really?
Yeah, great question again. This one, I think there are two things I would point to immediately. We have an app, a free app, and it's on both the Google Play Store as well as the Apple App Store. And it's called Pearson English Warmup. And Pearson English Warmup allows a candidate to get in and try out real test items. They can also choose to take either paper-based type test items or computer-based test items. Both are loaded into the app now. So they can get in there and have an experience with it and just see how they're doing and get some real feedback immediately on the reading and the listening components. The writing and the speaking components, they will be able to see their answers, listen to their answers against model answers. So I think that's going to give them a really good sense of what the test is going to be like and how they could be performing on it. In addition to that, we have this readiness product that I mentioned. And the readiness product would give them an experience with digital content in a test. So it allows them to see just how to predict how well they will do on the digital test. But it could also predict their outcomes on the paper-based test, whichever format you choose to deliver.
Fantastic. A question around sort of other types of certificate tests like TOEFL or IELTS, Cambridge. How does this compare? Is it in terms of recognition, I suppose, and how can a learner or a teacher check where the international certificate is recognised?
Okay, Yeah, this is equivalent to the Cambridge main suite. So Pearson English International Certificate is PTE General by a new name. PTE General's been around 30 years, a long time, and certifying and producing certificates all those years. And it is equivalent to Cambridge main suite. We've done some research to look at that and the equivalence between the two. So it's on the same CEFR scale. You earn a CEFR, meaning an A1, an A2, a B1, a B2, a C1, a C2, depending on what level you need for where you're headed. Where is it accepted? So on our website today, on our qualifications website for the paper-based test, we have a link for each country where the certificate is accepted and at what institutions, what government organizations, what ministries of education have approved the certificate for use in your country. So, so please have a look at that. And yeah, from an equivalent standpoint, if you're going to compare us, I would compare it most to Cambridge.
Fantastic. We've got more questions, I'm afraid, but we've run out of time. We're at the top of the hour. So thank you everybody for your questions, and sorry if we didn't manage to get around to yours. And thank you very much to Jane again for your time and fantastic talk. Please do register for more assessment summer camp sessions. You'll see the link to the program there on the screen. We're covering all sorts of different assessment-based subjects, assessment and courseware-based topics. So take a look at the program and sign up. And thank you again. Thanks a lot for coming, and hope to see you on Thursday for the next one.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for your time today. Take care.
Bye.